Okay, so hi everyone again. Very glad to have you all here. My topic for today's lecture is morbidly adherent placenta. And as Buddha has rightly said, attachment is the root of all suffering. Okay, in case you'll have any questions, queries during the course of the lecture, please feel free to type it out in the chat box below and we'll address it at the end of the lecture. Okay. So, the traditional term morbidly adherent placenta has currently been replaced by the term placenta accreta spectrum. Okay, so the Latin word ac plus crescere literally means to adhere or to become attached to. Okay, so placenta accreta spectrum is a spectrum of aberrant placentation characterized by abnormally implanted, invasive, or adhered placenta. So as you can see, the diagram or the picture here also shows how the placenta is very abnormally attached to the uterus. Okay. Now coming to the classification, classified as placenta accreta, placenta increta, and placenta percreta. So accreta is where the chorionic villi are attached to the myometrium. Increta is where the villi invade the myometrium. And percreta is where the villi penetrate through the myometrium and sometimes even through the serosa into the surrounding structures. Okay, so take a look at the diagram on the right. The first column shows you a normal placentation with an intervening endometrium or decidua followed by a myometrial layer and the serosal layer. The second, here we have the accreta, in which the decidua basalis is absent and the villi are directly adhered to the myometrium. In increta, these same villi are invading the myometrium, and in percreta, they are penetrating through the myometrium and almost through the serosa. So this is a photograph of a placenta accreta. You can see that there is no intervening endometrial layer. The placenta is directly adhered to the myometrium. This is placenta increta, in which if you can see, the placenta has invaded the myometrium, and the myometrium, you can see a very thin rim of myometrium over here as compared to accreta. And in placenta percreta, the entire placenta has penetrated through the myometrium. So you can't see any part of the myometrium over here. It has been replaced by the placenta. So what is the etiopathogenesis of this very morbid condition? So one, defect in the decidua basalis. This is the most important point in etiopathogenesis. It leads to imperfect development of Nitabuk's layer. Okay, so what exactly is this Nitabuk's layer? It is a layer of fibrinoid degeneration found in the zona spongiosa of the basalis layer. Okay, and it is through this layer that the natural cleavage plane of placental separation lies. Okay. Second point on etiopathogenesis also implicated is constitutional endometrial defect. So this can explain incidence of placenta accreta even in primigravidas. Sometimes very rare, but it can happen. And third is hyperinvasiveness. So this is due to abnormal expression of invasion related factors generally by the cytotrophoblastic cells, which can cause hyperinvasiveness of the chorionic villi into the myometrium. So taking a look at this diagram, we have the implanting embryo. What we are interested in is this part, okay? This part is going to give rise to the future placenta. So the part of the decidua overlying this is called the decidua basalis. Now we'll just take a magnified look of this very part. Okay, the slide is not very clear, I agree, but I'm going to explain it to you. So this is the chorionic villi, okay, lined by the syncytial trophoblast and the cytotrophoblast. Below this over here, these layers are the decidua basalis, below which lies the myometrium. Now decidua basalis has another zone called zona compacta and zona spongiosa, between which lies the Nitabuk's layer. So this purple layer over here is the layer of fibrinoid degeneration, and it is through the zona spongiosa of the decidua basalis that lies the physiological cleavage plane of the placenta. So whenever there is a defect in this decidua basalis, what happens? The chorionic villi directly adhere to the myometrium. So there is no physiological cleavage plane. So after delivery of the baby, the placenta will not come off easily. This is the histological slide showing again placental anchoring villi, okay, the maternal decidua, and this is the layer of fibrinoid deposits, the fibrinoid degeneration layer. Okay. Coming to incidence, all of us know that the incidence of placenta accreta spectrum has risen over the past few years, especially because of rising rates of cesarean sections. So if you see 100 years ago, the incidence was around 1 in 20,000 births, which is a very low incidence. And through the years, you can see how the incidence has increased. There was a paper in 2016 showing an incidence as high as 1 in 270 births. So why is this condition so alarming? It is a leading cause of peripartum hysterectomy and a major contributor of maternal morbidity and mortality. So what are the risk factors? All of us know the most important risk factor is previous cesarean section. So with a prior 1 cesarean section, rate of incidence is around 4.1% on an average. When the number of cesarean sections increases to 2, the rate more than doubles to 13.3%. Okay, next, placenta previa is an independent risk factor, and incidence of Acrete syndromes is more in placenta previa by 2%. However, a combination of these two is extremely dangerous. So there is a 39 to 60% incidence of placenta accreta syndromes in cases of placenta previa with a previous 2 or more prior cesarean deliveries. So this is exactly what this graph is explaining. On the x-axis, you have the number of prior cesarean deliveries in women with a current placenta previa. And on the y-axis, you have the percentage of Acrete syndromes. So as you can see, with the previous 1 cesarean delivery, there is a 3% chance. But as this increases to 5 previous cesarean deliveries, the incidence shoots up to 67%, which is extremely significant. Other risk factors include a prior classical cesarean section. Other endomyometrial trauma also increases the risk. Okay, so submucous myoma resection, a uterine curettage, Asherman syndrome, endometrial ablation. So all these are causes of an endometrial decidua basalis defect, okay, which increases the risk of placenta accreta. So endomyometrial trauma along with a placenta previa also increases the risk further to around 10%. Other risk factors, previous history of placenta accreta. So again, importance of history taking in your patient. IVF pregnancies, maybe because of an artificially induced endometrial development because of hormones. Age, parity, and 2 important factors, maternal serum alpha fetoprotein, more than 2.5 multiples of median, increases the risk to 8-fold. And beta HCG levels also more than 2.5 multiples of median, risk increases 4-fold. Okay, so these are part of quadruple markers, which you would do around 16 weeks of gestation. Okay, clinical features, there are not many clinical features. I mean, given the morbidity that this condition causes, the clinical features may arise due to hemorrhage, due to a coexisting placenta previa, and those without a placenta previa sometimes are not even diagnosed until the 3rd stage of labor or during cesarean section, when after delivery of the baby you realize that the placenta is just not separating. That is when sometimes first time an adherent placenta is encountered. Okay, so how do you diagnose these patients antenatally? Of course, ultrasonography. So the European Working Group on Abnormally Invasive Placenta, they have standardized the ultrasound description in Acrete syndromes. We are going to take a look at ultrasound images suggestive of Acrete syndromes. And this standardization was done to reduce errors due to subjectivity. Okay, if you can see, the sensitivity of ultrasound grayscale imaging is between 50% to 87%. So there is a wide range. So this is mainly due to inter-observer variation. That is why this standardization is important. Okay, if you add color Doppler to your 2D ultrasound, the sensitivity rises to 90%. Okay, I would suggest all of you go through the FIGO consensus guidelines on placenta accreta spectrum disorders. It's a very extensive guideline, of course, but it will give you a very good overview regarding the prenatal diagnosis, screening, as well as management of these patients. Okay, it is all evidence-based, and definitely take out some time to go through these guidelines. So coming to 2D grayscale USG, So what are the features of placenta accreta? First, loss of the retroplacental clear zone. So if you can see in figure B, there is a hypoechoic plane which is present retroplacentally. This is sonolucent area, okay, which is normally seen. Okay, but in A, you won't find this. So this is one of the features diagnosing placenta accreta. Next, abnormal placental lacunae. If you can see this asterisk part of the figure, okay, so these are abnormal placental spaces on 2D ultrasound which you can see. If you throw in a little color Doppler here, you will find that these are actually vascular lakes with turbulent flow, okay, intraplacental. Okay, so this is another feature suggesting Acrete syndrome. Next is interruption in the bladder wall. So this figure C is a normal figure in which smooth line of the bladder wall should be seen like this in a normal presentation. However, in Acrete syndromes, there is interruption in the bladder wall. In figure B, you can see there is literally the bladder wall has become irregular. Okay, this is suggestive of Acrete syndromes. Then myometrial thinning. So ideally, an easily identifiable myometrium should be seen. So you can see in figure C, this is normal placenta. You can see the boundary of the placenta over here. And this is the smooth wall of the bladder. And in between, you can see a very distinct myometrium, which is measurable. This myometrium will be absent in figure A and B, suggesting Acrete syndromes. Next, placental bulge. Again, you can see in figure A, there is a very clear-cut placental bulge, which indents the bladder. So the smooth line of the bladder is again interrupted over here. Focal exophytic mass. In cases of focal adherence, there will be a focal exophytic mass in the bladder serosa interface. Okay, so this mass again indenting the bladder, which is not seen in figure B, which is a normal presentation. On color Doppler, two features. One is subplacental hypervascularity. So in figure A, you can see there is a hypervascularity in the subplacental area. Figure B is normal. There is no such hypervascularity. Similarly, in the next figure, there is a uterovesical hypervascularity. So in the bladder serosa interface, if you find this hypervascularity, okay, it is again suggestive of Acrete syndromes, not seen in figure B, which is a normal presentation. And most important is a 3D power Doppler. It has a very high sensitivity of diagnosing Acrete syndromes. So these two figures are actually 3D reconstructions of intraplacental vasculature. Okay, so here you can see on the lateral view, and figure B is a basal view of the placenta, increased vascularity or hypervascularity, again a diagnostic feature of placenta accreta spectrum. MRI is not a screening modality. Okay, so though the sensitivity of MRI is 75 to 100% and specificity is 65 to 100%, MRI should not be used as a screening modality. Most important reason because it's very expensive and time consuming. Okay. But when should MRI be used? MRI does have a role to play in placenta accretas, evaluating the pelvic extension and depth of invasion of an already diagnosed placenta accreta spectrum. Okay, when you want further information on the involvement of adjacent structures, for example, in placenta percreta. And second, areas which are difficult to evaluate on ultrasound, for example, in posterior placenta previa. So an MRI could be used if you're suspecting an Acrete syndrome. So findings on MRI, uterine bulging, heterogeneous signals in the placenta, that is the vascular lakes or placental lacunae, and dark intraplacental bands seen on T2 weighted images. Okay, so what are the recommendations for screening patients given by RCOG and FIGO guidelines? Women with a history of previous cesarean section seen to have an anterior low-lying placenta or placenta previa as early as a routine fetal anomaly scan should be specifically screened for placenta accreta spectrum. So you can diagnose this as early as your fetal anomaly scan. Okay. Next, MRI may be used as a complement to ultrasound, as I said, to assess the depth of invasion or lateral extension or any signs which are suggesting parametrial invasion. For further information on these, you need to do an MRI. Coming to management of these patients, which is the most important part. And by now you must have known that antenatal diagnosis of these cases is very important. Okay, it is crucial in planning its management and has been shown to reduce maternal morbidity and mortality. Okay, so we're going to divide the patients into two. those who are diagnosed antenatally and those who are undiagnosed antenatally. So first group, diagnosed antenatally. 3 important points: timing of delivery, place of delivery, and multidisciplinary approach. Let's look at each one by one. Timing of delivery, RCOG recommends timing to be between 35 weeks and 36 plus 6 weeks of gestation, whereas ACOG recommends the timing of delivery to be between 34 weeks to 35 plus 6 weeks of gestation. So even though both of them are a week here and there, but the gist of this is that a preterm delivery should be planned because it is the best time to balance between fetal maturity and the risk of unscheduled delivery. So if you wait for more than this time, more than 37 weeks, it's going to lead to, can we have your mic switched off, please, everyone? Okay. If we wait for more than 37 weeks of gestation, the patient is going to land up in labor or maybe have an obstetric hemorrhage, and then you'll have to perform an emergency delivery on this patient, which we do not want. Okay, place of delivery, important tertiary care center, okay, which has blood banking facilities, an adult ICU, a neonatal ICU, a multidisciplinary team, which may include interventional radiologists if facilities are available, definitely an anesthetist, urologist and surgeon, depending upon the extent of invasion of adjacent structures. Important, in an emergency, the most senior clinicians available should be involved because there can be a number of complications while managing such patients. Preoperatively, what should you remember? Contingency plan must be charted for patient management. Patients and relatives should be counseled extensively regarding massive obstetric hemorrhage, increased risk of lower urinary tract damage, need for blood transfusion, and risk of hysterectomy. A good and appropriate consent is a must and it should be taken in all cases. Cesarean section should be done in routine hours when all senior clinicians are available, and the case should be informed to everyone involved in advance, including your OT staff. Okay, not only the surgeons or urologists who are going to help you in the management, but also everyone else who's going to be involved in this. Okay, now management proper. A cesarean hysterectomy with the placenta in situ is the most accepted management for placenta accreta spectrum, as stated by ACOG as well as RCOG in 2018. Certain points in a cesarean hysterectomy, how to go about. Vertical midline laparotomy is generally preferred for rapid access into the abdominal cavity as well as for more space if you're planning a cesarean hysterectomy. However, again, this depends upon the surgeon's preference. Hysterotomy, the uterine incision, before taking it, one thing you have to keep in mind, avoid cutting through the placenta. Otherwise, you're going to land up in a massive hemorrhage because of the extreme vascularity of the placental structure here. Okay, so in case of an anterior low-lying placenta, even if you have to take a classical hysterotomy incision or a fundal transverse incision, you should take it in order to avoid cutting through the placenta. Intra-arterial balloon inflation should be done after delivery of the baby. Okay, so in tertiary care centers, especially where interventional radiology facilities are available, you can place a preoperative prophylactic intra-arterial balloon-tipped catheter, ideally in the internal iliac artery. Okay, and after delivery of the baby, the balloons can be inflated in order to reduce the blood loss during a cesarean hysterectomy. So we're going to look at a little more in detail about this balloon inflation in the further slides. Next, do not attempt manual removal of placenta. Again, same reason, if you're going to attempt a manual removal, because of its adherence to the myometrium and extreme vascularity, you're going to land up with torrential hemorrhage. Okay, cord should be ligated near the placenta, and then you should proceed to obstetric hysterectomy with the placenta in situ. Also, one more thing, if you have taken especially a fundal or classical incision, make sure you close the uterine incision before proceeding to obstetric hysterectomy, or again, you're going to have massive hemorrhage. Okay. Now, in cases of placenta accreta, if there is a focal adherence, okay, this is what I'm doing, sorry. If there is a focal adherence, okay, the adhered part, if it is not too large, It can be separated surgically using either a bipolar cautery or a surgical cold knife, and the defect which is resulting can be sutured. But if it's a larger adherence, a uteroplacental en masse resection can be done, followed by uterine repair. So certain studies have shown that there is a lesser blood loss and morbidity as compared to a hysterectomy in these cases. But then again, you have to be very, very picky about selecting these cases. Okay, so proper case selection is very important in these cases if you're going to plan for removal of that focal adherence. In cases of a global adherence, of course, cesarean hysterectomy with placenta in situ is recommended. In cases of placenta increta and placenta percreta, again, ideally the accepted management is cesarean hysterectomy with placenta in situ. So involvement of urologist, surgeon, interventional radiologist in cases of adjacent organ involvement in placenta percreta is important. Ureteric stenting, okay, especially cases of percreta, there is doubtful evidence stating the routine use in every patient. So you need to individualize your cases. Okay, coming to prophylactic balloon catheterization. If you look at the figure on your left, this is how it's done. It's done preoperatively as a prophylactic measure under fluoroscopy guidance. Okay, so the catheter is inserted in the femoral artery and pushed into the rail tract into the external iliac, into the common iliac or internal iliac. So the most commonly catheterized artery is internal iliac artery. Okay, it should be done bilaterally. And after delivery of the baby, before you proceed with your cesarean hysterectomy, both the balloons are inflated. So it said that this reduces the amount of blood loss during your surgery. Okay, it is also used as an adjuvant to expectant management. We'll see expectant management soon. And this is a fluoroscopic picture of the same. Here it is, the balloon tipped catheter is in the internal iliac artery. Okay. So balloon catheterization, one of the papers or studies done by Gulino et al. In 2018 states that there was a reduced intraoperative blood loss, intraoperative red cell transfusion, and reduced rates of hysterectomies in patients with placenta accreta in whom this balloon catheterization was done. However, RCOG has stated that larger studies are necessary before this technique can be advised in the routine management of placenta accreta spectrum. Coming to uterine preservation and expectant management. Okay, now these two are different terms. Uterine preservation means placental removal without uterine removal. So the uterus is in place, but you have removed the placenta. And expectant management is when the placenta is left partially or totally in situ with the uterus. So what are the indications in which each of these can be done? Uterine preservation, we have seen, if there is a focal adherence or a large focal adherence and patient is desirous of fertility, then you have to weigh the risk and benefit, and you can remove the placenta or a uteroplacental wedge from the uterus, suture up the repair, and this again results in lesser blood loss as compared to a hysterectomy in certain properly selected patients. Expectant management, when the patient is desirous of fertility, and second point, when there is extensive involvement, example in cases of percreta where there is involvement of the adjacent bladder, the ureters, then in these cases it is more dangerous to operate in the same sitting as the cesarean section, okay, because of vascularity, distorted anatomy. So it is better sometimes to leave the placenta in situ and then perform a delayed hysterectomy maybe 6 to 8 weeks later to reduce the blood loss and morbidity of the patient. So expectant management, when the placenta is in situ along with the uterus, the rationale for keeping the placenta is believed that the placenta will get resorbed around 1 to 12 months in most of the studies, average of 6 months, it does get resolved. And how do you follow up these patients? So RCOG recommendations are ensure a regular review. So you have to counsel the patient that the patient needs to come regularly for serial ultrasound examinations or serial MRI examinations. She should have access to emergency care in case of complications like bleeding or fever. Methotrexate adjuvant therapy has been studied vastly, and it has now been suggested that it should not be used for expectant management in these cases where you have kept the placenta in situ because of its unproven benefit and significant adverse effects like hepatotoxicity and hematological toxicity. Okay. Serial beta HCG again is not informative. Better to do serial USGs and serial MRIs. Complications of expectant management, they are extremely formidable complications, includes sepsis, septic shock, peritonitis, uterine necrosis, fistulas in case of Purkinje's, DIC because of the necrosing placenta, organ injury, kidney injuries, deep vein thrombosis, severe bleeding, and sometimes even a secondary hysterectomy. So most of the studies have shown that in 30 to 50% of cases managed with expectant management, there has been a failure, which means the patient ultimately did require a secondary hysterectomy. Okay, so that is why adequate counseling of these patients opting for this management is very important. You need to explain to them the risk of failure as well as these complications, which are very morbid. Okay, so it should be used only in selected patients who have a very strong desire for future fertility. Coming to the second group of patients, which is the more dangerous group, the undiagnosed cases, or cases who you have diagnosed during an elective or emergency cesarean section or after vaginal delivery. Okay, so you have opened the abdomen on a cesarean section, and what you see before taking the uterine incision is that there is evidence of placenta percreta. So what do? So if your patient is stable and there is no emergency, and you know that you do not have the necessary facilities like blood bank, ICU, close the abdomen and transfer the patient to a higher center, provided the patient is stable, of course. Okay. If you have the facilities, well and good. Then you wait before giving the uterine incision. You wait, arrange for senior help, arrange for blood products, make all the necessary preparations, and then you proceed to a delivery and hysterectomy with placenta in situ. If an emergency is present, then if facilities are not available, you stabilize the patient and you transfer the patient to a higher center. It is better that you transfer the patient than manage the patient at your own center if you feel that all the facilities are suboptimal, okay, because it can lead to a number of complications. And secondly, if it happens after delivery of the fetus, so the fetus has been delivered and now the placenta just refuses to come out, it just does not separate. So if the placenta is not separating on its own, don't try to manually remove it. Okay, if you, the moment you put your hand, you'll find that you won't get that plane, that cleavage plane through which the placenta separates. Okay, so in such a situation, if the patient is stable, there is no bleeding, you do not have the necessary facilities, or there are suboptimal conditions, close the uterus and abdomen and transfer the stable patient, okay, for management at a higher center. Do not try to remove the placenta manually and then try to suture the bed. Don't try to do all that. Just close the uterus, close the abdomen and transfer the patient. If you have the facilities, excellent. Arrange for help, arrange for blood and blood products, and then proceed to a hysterectomy with the placenta in situ. Again, if the patient is unstable or the patient starts bleeding, and if you do not have the facilities, first stabilize the patient before transferring her to a higher center. If required, sometimes you might even have to do a cesarean hysterectomy. If the patient is bleeding, there is massive hemorrhage, you cannot just transfer the patient. You have to do a cesarean hysterectomy at least, and then when the patient is stable after that, you transfer her for ICU care or post-operative management to a higher center. Okay. So this brings us to the last part of my presentation, which is the take-home message. I think this is the most important part of any lecture. Antenatal diagnosis in these cases is the key. Management in a tertiary care center should take place. Blood bank should be capable of massive transfusion protocols, which is very important. There should be a well-equipped ICU for management of post-operative patients. Multidisciplinary approach, I have spoken about this. Interventional radiology may be a useful adjunct, especially balloon catheterization and arterial embolization as well. Okay. Hysterectomy with placenta in situ is the most accepted treatment. Uterine conservation and expectant management should rarely be used. It should not be used on a routine basis and only in very individualized cases, the indications of which we have seen. And the most important take-home message from this lecture is avoid unnecessary primary C-sections, unindicated primary C-sections, so as to reduce the incidence of this very, very, very formidable complication of placenta accreta spectrum. Okay.